Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Thank you all for joining us. We are live once again for another watch party. Um, so everybody shout out, make sure we're loaded, we're live, we're on our way. With me today is, don't let the name fool you. It's really James. Welcome, James Grand Moff Pazuzu.
I'm crossing franchises today.
Oh, it's all good. Um, and Yoda will be joining me today in the background. Wrong movie, of course, but um, there you go. He's my buddy. Um, so welcome one and all. This is going to be exciting. Star Wars: A New Hope. I am probably 100% positive you all have at least seen it once, maybe half a million times. Um, and may the fourth be with you. Let's rock and roll. And how about counting us down there, James?
Ooh, so that will be a 5, a 4, a 3, a 2, a 1, and hit play to get our black screen.
Yep. And we will, um, depending on what copy everybody has, we might be a little off, but it's so hard to get a continuity of what version everybody should watch because we all have versions dating back to the theatrical cut, we have special edition, then we have the despecialized editions, we have all the iterations of Blu-ray, DVDs,
There's
George
about a
Lucas.
2.5 minute difference in running time between the despecialized edition and the whatever the hell it is on Disney Plus McClunky edition.
Exactly. And I think a lot of you out there are doing the McClunky version off Disney Plus, which is just fine. Um, but for all of you that, like me, have seen this in the theater dating back to the late 70s, the theatrical cut will be forever and always the best. Um, and then Lucas started changing his mind, adding all the stuff, and then everybody got their hand in it. So,
I think by the time I would have first seen it, it would have only have had one bit of meddling, which was to put in the episode for A New Hope title card.
yeah, and that dates back a long time. Um, so, without further ado, as the credits are rolling, or the crawl, the intro, that famous music, here we go. Um, let's introduce everybody joining us today over there in the YouTube chat. We have Mad Matt, Miss Swift, we have Alex, Calbot, Johnny Debick, Hell if I know. Let's see, Eric's joining us. Let's see, who am I missing? Edward the Black Prince. Let's see, did I miss anybody? Nope. All right, and then over there in Discord, hey, we got Matt, Calbot, Alex, Sith, Sister Yeltia. Welcome. That's the name that I am not familiar with. So welcome. Welcome, welcome. Eric's over there, Mr. Furzel. Wonderful. We've got a lot of people joining us today. So one of the things that I will try not to do is to recite the movie. I have seen this so many times, as probably you have. We know the movie by heart, we know the dialogue, we know the scenes by heart, but that doesn't keep us from absolutely loving this movie every time we watch it, and we watch it over and over and over again. Sometimes in the background as you're doing your day, as you're working, it's just that good. Um, what do you think, James?
I see Ms. Swift saying we need a few more cuts of Blade Runner and Alien 3 to keep up with the Star Wars editions. Well, coincidentally, there was a new cut of Alien 3 that was doing the rounds the other day that some fans have made, that's taking stuff from the assembly cut, various rough cuts and a theatrical cut to try and make the ultimate Alien 3.
The ultimate. Okay, as if one version was not enough. Um,
Hey,
so yes,
one is the
so
alien in a cow, the other is the alien in a dog. They're completely different.
and why not? It seems like everybody nowadays can just change a little bit in the movie and just call it a new edition. But we all know it's a lie. But so anyway, on Discord, Sith Sister Yeltia, just so everyone knows, I'm formerly Jedi Wizard, but new changes had to reflect new names. Still the same person. So Jedi Wizard, welcome back. So glad to have you all today. Um, so And okay, where there was Alex's comment, we can do a recite along, Princess Bride and AKA like Princess Bride another time. Yeah, we could all just recite this movie. Um, but that's kind of half the fun. Yep, here come the troopers. Cowbot says I'm holding out for the frog cut of Alien 3. Ah,
As I was saying to Sharon, I was preparing for this earlier with the radio cut, so I was originally going to ask you all to go away for an hour and a half while I listen to the 3 episodes that have all the stuff that happens before the film to get me up to speed.
and that's quite a radio broadcast. And you're talking about the BBC one,
It's not
right? And they did.
BBC, it was American National Public Radio. George Lucas
Okay.
literally gave them the rights to all 3 films.
Yeah, that's something to listen to if you haven't listened to them yet. Um,
Star Wars is a mere 5.5 hours long.
oh, is that all?
Mm.
Oh yes, Alex, love the NPR radio dramas. Yeah, they are available. If
Oh,
you're
Audible. Yeah, by the end of episode 3, you've just about got up to where we are in the film.
just about. And if I remember correctly, the radio dramas had a couple of the original voices.
You've got Mark Hamill
Mark Hamill was,
and
but
Anthony Daniels. You get Billy D. Williams turns up in Empire and Return. You have
yeah.
Brock Peters as Darth Vader, which is good fun, and Perry King as Han Solo, the definitive item. John
Well,
Lithgow as Yoda.
fire. So what
Oh, we've lost
oh, did I cut
Sharon. We've
out?
got Sharon
Um
back.
chats. What Star Wars memorabilia does everybody have? I think I lost James.
I'm still here. So the audience appears to think I'm still here and Sharon isn't, whereas Sharon thinks Sharon's here and I'm not. Is that correct? I think Sharon froze too. See, this is what happens when she has Pazuzu as her co-pilot. So Sharon's question was, what items of Star Wars memorabilia
This
does
is
everyone have?
ridiculous. We are still here.
I think
We are still here.
the only stuff I have now is I've got the big 4K box set of the Skywalker saga, some Project 4K discs of the original cuts, and my long out of print CDs of the radio series, and that's it.
So yeah, I think I cut out for a minute, but James was there, right? As
I
long
was
as
there.
James is okay. So apparently my hardwired internet is still giving me fits. But hopefully, if we have another problem, I can get my other internet up and running.
Now, am I the only one who finds robots in the Star Wars universe to be somewhat puzzling? Because they've kind of got hopes and fears and aspirations and emotions, and yet at the same time, they're basically slaves. And you kind of go, well, I expect that of the Empire, but the Rebel Alliance don't treat them any differently either. So, are they real personalities or are they just programmed to simulate a personality? Is C3PO self aware or is he a glorified toaster just programmed to make you think he's self aware?
That's a very good question. They seem to be very self aware.
In which case, everyone in this is pretty damn evil.
They are. They put restraining bolts on them so they don't wander too far. You would think if they were actually just slaves that they would be programmed to just input in, input out, to do what
Quite,
they're
quite
told.
right, Edward the Black Prince. Droid lives matter.
Yes, Matt, we don't serve their kind here. Um,
Yes.
so
Discrimination
that's a good
against
point.
droids is the acceptable face of racism today.
Well, but you know what? It's not just R2 and C3PO that are self-aware. There were, um, in Empire in the Cloud City with those robots working in like the disposal unit. They seem pretty self-aware too. Um, on Jabba's sail barge, there were other robots that seemed pretty self-aware. Um, I don't, yeah, because I don't think R2 was the only droid on the sail barge.
Yeah,
Uh,
but then you see, this is my whole issue with it because it then puts everyone from Luke and old Ben Kenobi on basically exactly the same moral plane on this issue as the Emperor and Jabba the Hutt.
Good point.
That's
Yeah.
when Luke's not going out for fun, gunning down sand people and things.
Well, that is a very interesting perspective. Probably not something I had thought about in this universe. But they've obviously been programmed to be servants, but they do have personalities. They have desires. They can express their desires,
I think more than
and
that, they have fears.
and they can be very disobedient. So, yeah, very interesting. Well, okay, yeah. Hell if I know. I just don't know why Obi-Wan doesn't recognize R2.
Because the
Probably
prequel
time.
trilogies never happened.
Yeah, they did. They did.
No, they
No
didn't.
matter. Uh, um, is there anybody in the group that does not remember when the first trilogy came out, then the second trilogy came out in the theaters? There was there was very how do I say this? when the first trilogy came out, it was a very different culture surrounding when the movies came out. So then you fast forward 25 years to the second trilogy, they weren't met with kindness, because I mean they weren't as good as the original, what everybody expected and wanted.
I,
Um,
I mean, I also in like in terms of production and things, they just don't look like they're part of the same universe. You know, yes, there's lots of stuff in the original
yeah.
films that look very 1970s or 80s because that's when they were filmed, so people had those haircuts. But like all the background artists and things are people who I'd be used to seeing on British television all the time. Then suddenly, because it's being shot with New Zealand or Australian tax breaks, everyone's flipping Tamara Morrison. And it just doesn't look or feel the same. And that's before you get into stuff being digital, CGI, versus actually having people in robot costumes.
You're absolutely right. It was a very different time period when the original trilogy was made. There will never be, as far as I'm concerned, never anything in the Star Wars universe will never touch that. Okay, so my version has the stormtroopers walking through the desert on the creatures, um, the CGI creatures, and this is just wrong.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, last time I watched through the McClunky edition on the 4K discs, the bits that I found were the most dated and took me out of it the most were all the bits Lucas had been and put in with CGI dinosaurs running around in the background because they just didn't look like anything else there and look really out of place.
yeah, absolutely. Eric is asking you, James, the T-shirt that you're wearing is at the movie Hardware, made by Richard
It
Stanley.
is. This is Mark 13. Everyone's favourite killer military robot.
I thought it was Hardware Wars because I could only see the top of your shirt.
But top of Mark 13's head.
Um,
Well,
Mr.
I also
Furzel,
have to point out in the Star Wars universe, these humans are obviously also horrible colonialist oppressors, because quite clearly this desert planet belonged to Jawas and sand people before these nasty moisture farmers moved in and kicked them out.
and you know what? Now the Jawas are resorting to stealing old robots, stealing what they can to survive, and then selling it back to the humans. That's
Yeah.
a good point. Um, Mr. Furzel posted a uh, a Jar Jar Binks, um, whatever that bastarded candy is. Oh, from the original trilogy, that candy. I remember that. Um, Edward the Black Prince. I was a kid, like 9 or 12 when the prequels came out. We loved them, but many realize the problem they have now, but still have its moments. Yeah, uh, I I'll give you that. When those the pre trilogy came out in the late '90s, early 2000s, it had its place in culture, and a lot of people were drawn to it that were not around when the original trilogy came out. Um, and of course, I'm speaking from a perspective of I was 7 or 8 when I saw A New Hope in the theater, and it absolutely changed my life. And it set the bar so high as to what this is, the Star Wars universe. Then a couple years later, Empire. Then a couple years later, Return of the
Is
Jedi.
it
It
worth
just,
asking when people first saw Star Wars?
yeah. it set the bar. So then you have the next generations who weren't maybe familiar with the first, then they see the prequel trilogy. I saw the prequel trilogy maybe 50 times. So it has its place in the universe.
I fell asleep watching Revenge of the Sith at the cinema.
Oh,
It
oh,
was.
did you miss the ending?
I felt it was in. I felt I was watching someone else play an incredibly boring video game, and the next thing I
Really?
knew, I woke up.
Wow, you woke up what when it was over?
Yep. I just think the prequel trilogy are awful, but they seem to feel a need to go into great detail trying to explain the backstory of everything when it's just not it's not necessary because it's all quite elegantly sketched in with a couple of lines in each film, and B, it has no dramatic tension to it whatsoever because you know that young Anakin is going to be a wrong 'un and become Darth Vader, so where's the suspense?
Yeah.
And if you watch them first, it totally ruins the big twist in The Empire Strikes Back because you kind of go, well, yeah, he's your dad. We've known that for several films now.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, there's a certain amount of that watching it. You already know the whole story, so you're just watching what led up to where we are now. We're watching A New Hope. So back when this came out, it was all we had. And imagine a world where this was the only movie we had, and we didn't know that there was a sequel. We didn't know it was going to become this whole big franchise world of Star Wars. And this was all we could talk about. And it was basically, in and of itself, this was Star Wars. There wasn't anything else. Um, Back
In
when,
terms of
life was
getting
good.
anything else like it in the cinema, because it takes a couple of years for a trend to filter through into production, because what's being released next year is being made this year. You know, basically,
Yeah.
it's not really until 1979, 1980 that you start seeing the films influenced by Star Wars coming through. So,
Yeah.
bizarrely, the first thing anyone probably sees that's influenced by Star Wars in the cinema is the Battlestar Galactica Saga of a Star World movie, which has John DeStryker doing the special effects and a sleazy cantina bar with Dirk Benedict pretending to be Harrison Ford.
Yeah, that's a good point. So your exposure to the Star Wars universe depends on it all depends on what you have at the time, what your experience is with it. And so it,
So
that's,
I,
you know what? It is what it is. And we know Star Wars is one of the biggest, most successful franchises there are,
and
with
it gave
all
us the
the
James Bond film Moonraker, for which I shall forever be grateful.
iterations.
That's a
um,
prime example of the cinema reacting to the success of Star Wars that they suddenly
yeah,
retool the next James Bond film to put Roger Moore in space.
that was, I think, Moonraker was one of the first James Bond movies I actually saw in the theater.
Mm.
Um, yeah, Calbot says first saw Star Wars in the original run. I was 7, changed my life. Yep.
I would have first seen it over here in the UK, ITV, which was back in the days when we had 3 TV stations. That was number
Mhm.
3. The commercial station, that basically they bought Star Wars for £1.5 million and had it up until about 1990 exclusively, and they'd be quite sparing showing it. So although I remember it being on all the time, they basically would only show it every other year because then they could get 25 million people watching it and mucho ad revenue in. And so looking at the dates, because I know I saw it before Return of the Jedi, I
Mhm.
must have seen it on the 15th of September 1983.
Good memory. That was
Because the next showing was December 84, which was after Return of the Jedi was in the cinemas. And I
that's
saw
true.
Return of the Jedi in the cinemas, already having seen Star Wars, but didn't see Empire Strikes Back until 1988 when it made it to television over here.
Very interesting. There were, if my memory serves, there were a couple of theatrical runs for A New Hope. Um, of course, when it first came out, then I recall seeing it in the movie theater again a couple years later. So it must have tied into probably a like pre Empire Strikes Back release, maybe a pre Return of the Jedi release. So then we got to see it in the movie theater again and again.
Well, to this
Um,
to this day, my mother bitterly complains about being forced to take me to the cinema when we were on holiday to watch Return of the Jedi, as she puts it, that awful film with Jabba the Hutt and a woman chained to him.
oh, it's all perspective, isn't it? I remember Return of the Jedi was the first movie I stayed in line for hours and hours and hours to see.
Of course, an awful movie with Jabba the Hutt in, from another perspective, could be this one.
Uh, so, yes. And I'm going to groan about it when we get to that part because my version has Jabba the Hutt. It was bad enough when they put the guy in as a placeholder for Jabba the Hutt, but then they went back and actually CGI'd Jabba the Hutt in.
I
Uh,
do like the original untreated footage with Jabba the Hutt as basically some wheeler dealer in a fur coat.
in this big fur coat, this big burly man in a fur coat. And I don't know which one is worse. When you've grown accustomed to something so personal as the theatrical release of Star Wars, then you start changing it and adding the CGI. I don't know what's worse when they put the CGI Jabba the Hutt, the CGI, the Dewbacks in there a few scenes ago. When you're putting the CGI where it doesn't belong, or you're putting people in where they don't belong because you know they don't belong.
Well,
Um,
I'd say the two things that I think are worst that are done in the done to the original trilogy. I think the first with this one is we've got Oscar-winning special effects where you can no longer see the special effects that won the Oscar because they've been replaced. That
yeah,
that is cultural vandalism, in my opinion.
yes.
And then
That
the other thing I think is terrible doesn't affect this film. It does the other two, and that's when entire performances are erased. So a few weeks back, the actor Clive Revill died, and all his obituaries said that he'd been the voice of the Emperor in The Empire Strikes Back. You try popping on The Empire Strikes Back on Disney Plus. Clive Revill's not in that anymore. It's Ian McDiarmid. Sebastian Shaw in his obituary, it said he was Anakin Skywalker in Return of the Jedi, except they've superimposed Hayden Christensen over the top. You've got the actors who voiced Boba Fett, who, in the interests of continuity with the prequel films, they've had Tamara Morrison redub it and redub Stormtroopers. And I just think that's really insulting to the people who played it the first time, who we saw in the cinema, who we saw on video.
Absolutely. Yeah, good point. I want to keep saying Sith sister because that's your posted name, but I know it's Jedi Wizard. He says when you get used to something and it changes form, it does freak you out. I have plenty of movies where I sonically know the sound, but if it uses a different mix of dialogue or music, I'm just thrown. It takes you out of the movie if you are not ready for it. Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at with especially the movies before the CGI took effect.
You see,
When you have CGI in the movie, okay, that's fine. You've made a movie with CGI, but if you've made a movie with practical effects, let's just leave it alone. There's no need to improve it.
when it's something like, say, the director's edition of The Wrath of Khan, I'm much
Mm,
less fussed about it because it comes down to a few seconds of a different take in a turbo lift and Kirk in a Kirk crawling through a Jeffries tube saying, "That boy's my son." You know, it's just
yeah.
that's literally all it is. It's not like they've gone through and said, well, in Into Darkness we have Benedict Cumberbatch as Khan, so can we CGI impose Benedict Cumberbatch over Ricardo Montalban?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Oh, the one and only Alec Guinness. Yes, round of applause. Forever will be known as Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I
yeah,
understand originally it was Peter Cushing who was offered the role of Kenobi, but he basically had other filming commitments and so couldn't take it. Um, it was kind of Lucas had wanted to balance out the cast with some older, more experienced people, and so turned to Guinness, who sadly, although he liked the money, had utter contempt for the product he
yeah,
produced.
yeah. And Mr. Furzel made that exact comment over in Discord. Glad that Alec Guinness appreciated this role later in life. Yeah, because at the time he didn't. Um,
I think the difference with him and Cushing is neither of them really understood the parts they were playing or the dialogue, but Cushing had done horror and sci-fi, and so he thought it was something his fan base would like. Or like when he did the Doctor Who films, he said, "Well, last I'm doing a film my children can see in the cinema." Whereas, whereas, yeah, basically, you'll get later on. Spoiler: when Obi-Wan Kenobi dies, that's basically because Alec Guinness says, "I don't want to be in any sequels, George. Can you kill my character?"
yes. And don't worry about spoilers. This movie is far too popular. We don't have to worry about spoilers.
So
Yeah, you're
we
right.
don't
He
have to
didn't.
worry about spoiling the fact
Mm-mm.
that
No.
Darth Vader is Luke's father's brother's uncle's roommate's college friend.
And, by the way, Luke and Leia are brother and sister. Um, but yeah, you're right. And actually, because we probably all know, we've all seen interviews and the making of this movie as the actors were auditioning for this role. None of the dialogue made sense that they were having to do in the casting calls. None of the dialogue made sense. They had no idea what they were talking about, and it was just like this role that they were going up for. So it
Well,
wasn't until the movie came out that they understand that what
it's
impact they have.
why production on an Empire Strikes Back is so different, because then everyone has seen the original film and knows what
Yes.
Lucas was trying to do. Whereas here, it's like, Carrie Fisher says about the dialogue, like, George, you can write this stuff, but you sure as hell can't say it.
Exactly. Exactly. But when you think about where they were back when they made this movie, of course, it was nothing had been done like it. So they kind of all did their job and thinking, okay, let's go on to the next job.
But
When
it's
they actually saw the people lining up in the for the theater release and the money that it was generating and the press that it was generating, I think Carrie Fisher was the one that said,
Sharon has been frozen by the words of Ben Kenobi describing how the Jedi are now all but extinct.
everyone dies in this one. Yeah.
And Sharon has gone again and come in.
Oh, okay.
The hand
Good.
waving over the
We
force
didn't
made you
lose me
come
for too
back.
long. Did we still lose James? Is James still there?
I'm still here.
There we go. All right. Are we stuck?
By the words of Ben
I'm stuck.
Kenobi describing how the Jedi are now all but extinct.
Everyone dies in this one.
So are we back or are we not here or is what's going on? I'm
Okay.
confused.
There we go. All right. Now I'm back.
See, we get to an important dialogue scene with Obi-Wan Kenobi explaining all the backstory.
We're all here. Yes.
We don't need to
I'm
watch
afraid
the
to touch
prequel
anything.
films.
We're going to lose it again. Yeah, Alex. Am I not live? I'm going to have volume up on the other one.
I don't think you're live, Sharon. I can hear
Okay, I'm back. Am I back? I can't tell if I'm live. Yeah, is it live or Memorex?
Right. Alex says you're live.
So hard to figure out what the heck was that. Okay, so I still have work that needs to be done on my internet. But there you go. At least it's not as bad as last week.
Again, this is what I'm talking about with all the British character actors making up the Imperial troops. So got Don Henderson, Leslie Schofield, and of course Peter Cushing. And as I understand it, the role of Tarkin, Lucas essentially came up with this to get Cushing back in the film because he thought that as Vader has a full face helmet, that he actually wanted a human antagonist to be able to face off against the heroes, or, well, at least face off against Leia. Because he doesn't meet the others.
And I'm assuming, well, maybe I shouldn't assume, in which of the new Star Wars movies had the digital de-aged Peter Cushing?
Rogue One had the actor Guy Henry with a CGI Cushing slapped on top of him, and
Yes.
some other voice actor, and it was all it was very Uncanny Valley. Just like, did you see Alien Romulus last year, where they brought back Ian Holm as Mr. Rook the android? And it's like, even now, all these years later, they still can't do it without it looking weird.
It, CGI does have its limits. Um,
I mean, the irony is that in the Rebels cartoon series, they had a voice artist who did an excellent Peter Cushing for their Moff Tarkin, so they didn't reuse him for that film.
um, I can't keep these new movies. Come on.
Excellent Peter Cushing. And Sharon has gone again, come again, and is in a time loop.
I can see myself now. Can you not?
You're back.
Am I back? Am I
Yep.
back?
So, in as a brief recap, we've just got to the point in the film where, to make a change from imperialist Luke and imperialist Ben shooting up sand people, the imperialist Empire has shot up Jawas.
Yeah, that'll show them.
So I'm not really seeing much moral difference between the two, apart from the fact that when they're shooting Jawas, that appears to be the only time the Empire can hit the target.
Maybe because there were a lot of them. Who knows?
Oh, I keep seeing an advert for a lovely spoof Star Wars action figure set on Facebook that pops up as these two burnt skeletons, and it's an Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru action figure.
Yeah, Edward the Black Prince, they did have a reason to shoot the Jawas to further the story. Um, yeah, that would have been interesting to have the minifigs of the burnt Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru.
Of course, in real life, Uncle Owen basically lived off being in this film, making his living doing the convention circuit, signing autographs and photos. And
Yeah.
even in the last few years, where he was basically immobile, dying in hideous pain, his wife would wheel him out onto the convention circuit and would hold his hand to steer the pen over a photo in exchange for a few dollars.
Yep, and I figured we would get to that discussion about how stormtroopers can't hit the side of a barn with a bullet,
But they
uh,
can hit Jawas.
but they can hit Jawas. But you know what? If they couldn't massacre the Jawas, then it wouldn't further the story. So that's how they further the story.
Well, they massacred
Um,
the Jawas because they were looking for the
the
droids.
droids. Yeah, and
And
it
then
led
it's
them
all fitting in. Their cover story is the Sand people are fed up with Luke and old Ben shooting them up, so they've gone on a grand Sand people massacre of Jawas and colonists.
yes. So yeah, in order to get the information they want, they're slaughtering everybody. But so now we have the gallant young Luke Skywalker. He's joining the fight. That's it. That's the turning point. He's going to go off with this
And
creepy
I
old
think
man who lives in the
any
desert.
minute now we're going to see a hive of scum and villainy that's swarming with CGI dinosaurs.
Oh, yep. And we're going to get to the scene where the CGI of all the little creatures crawling in front of the cantina in Mos Eisley, where they didn't belong in the first place. We got the little rats or kangaroo rats, whatever they're
And,
called, and a little
and having
levity.
And having got the Disney Plus and the theatrical cut running side by side, I'm now completely out of sync.
So you've got two versions, two different versions.
Yeah, I've got the 4K 77 version running in my Blu-ray player, and we've just had some stormtroopers be mind controlled. And in the Disney version, there's still dinosaurs running everywhere. And a big CGI panning shot of a CGI city.
Ah, okay. So my version is we don't need to see the identification. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Move along. You can go about your business. Move along. Move along.
Yeah, but basically adding in the CGI dinosaurs and the CGI panning shot of the city means that we're already in the cantina effectively on the original
Mm.
version.
Yeah, and there was a comment earlier about some of the edited versions are actually shorter than the theatrical by maybe, I think, maybe 30 seconds to a minute.
It would depend what you're looking at, because I think if it's the Harmy's version, he's taken like the special editions and tried to work backwards to what it was originally. Whereas if you've got the Project 4K, that has literally taken theatrical prints from the original release run and restored them and stuck them on a disc. So that should pretty much be what you've seen on the original release run. Now, there's a good story I heard about a, about Michelle Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas when she saw Star Wars for the first time. She was taken to see it by her stepbrother who'd done some work on the film, and she was sitting in the cinema and she said there was this scene where there was a guy in a bear suit and a guy dressed as a cowboy, and
Okay.
and she gasped and leant forward and said, "That's my pot dealer."
Okay.
As Harrison Ford had apparently been a Hollywood drug dealer before his acting career took off.
That I had not heard.
And it's
Uh,
in her autobiography, which is still in print, so it must be true, or she'd have been sued.
and yeah, or it would have been removed. Very interesting.
And obviously, this scene, we're just getting what's usually one of the most controversial updates in the film. Who shoots first? Which,
Exactly. I was going
which
to say,
could be
big
which I
change.
think there are at least 3 versions of now.
Who is pro Han shoots first? I mean,
Han
that's
Han shoots first.
yeah. Alex Peacock says dealer, carpenter, multifaceted man. I had always read that he was just a carpenter at the time that he auditioned for this.
No,
Did not know.
apparently he was also the Doors pop dealer.
Oh God. Well,
But then it's like you know how Harrison Ford was cast in this, that basically Lucas had wanted unknowns for all the main roles. So he didn't want to hire Harrison Ford because he'd been in American Graffiti. But because Harrison Ford was on set doing, carpenter stuff, not drug dealing stuff, carpenter stuff, he got him in to do the readings with all the other actors and when the auditions were going on. So basically, Harrison Ford was the Star Wars expert, reading pretty
yeah.
much every part. And they ended up kind of going, actually, he's reading that Han Solo character better than anyone else we've had in.
Yep, exactly. Alex reiterated that too. He was just the line reader to fill in. And that's just interesting how things just fall into place. Yeah, hell if I know. I'm sure his looks had nothing to do with it either. Yeah.
Although, I mean, the claim that they are only auditioning unknowns, I'm not sure that really holds up when you kind of see that they had people like Kurt Russell reading for Luke when Kurt Russell had been a childhood star.
Yeah. Carrie Fisher was also not that unknown when she was doing the reading.
You make
Um,
you make it sound as if Lucas just tells a load of lies for whatever's the best story at the time.
right. And I think it was he didn't want the major stars. He didn't want blockbuster heavy hitters in
Well,
these roles.
it's also he probably couldn't afford them with what he
Yeah,
wanted to do,
exactly.
because the two highest paid people on the film in terms of the day rate were Peter Cushing and Alec Guinness.
Hmm.
Peter Cushing was on $2,000 a day. Harrison Ford was on 750. Mark Hamill 500.
Yep. Miss Swift, I think Corvette Summer was after early early 80s. I think it was pre-Empire, but after A New Hope, if I remember correctly. Corvette Summer was probably 81.
No, Alex. Kurt Russell auditioned for both Solo and Luke Skywalker.
Oh no, Corvette Summer came 78. So it was still within after this, but before Empire. Um, yeah, and I think a lot of people like me saw Corvette Summer simply because he was in this movie, and it had Annie. Was it Annie Potts was also in it before she hit it big? Okay, so yeah, Greedo is about to become toast. So Alex says Alec also got a percentage in his contract, which they upped.
Well, presumably part of that was to get him to reappear as a Force ghost in the two
Well,
later films, because that would have been Alec Guinness's bargaining chip. They wouldn't have given him the extra cash out of the goodness of their hearts.
there he goes. He shot. No, my version had it looked
The
like Greedo.
clunky.
No. So don't get me wrong. I absolutely love this movie. I just don't like the changes. Keep it real. Keep it real. Lucas should have just let it lie. Because back in the day, I was in the 90s, I think, when he really started to push for these special editions. Um, he was all over the press saying he wanted to make changes to this trilogy based on what he originally wanted, but they didn't have either the money, the resources, the technology. They had no
And
way of doing it, so he had to go back and add it after.
the
And
irony of this is that long before that, Lucas was one of the people campaigning against Ted Turner and others, colorizing classic movies, saying that was an act of cultural vandalism. So it just seems particularly amazing that he then turns around and does far worse than colorizing a Laurel and Hardy movie to this.
yeah, exactly. And I believe, however long ago the Harmy's despecialized editions came out, they've been around for a very long time. Once you've seen all these special editions and you're able to go back to the theatrical version, it's like a breath of fresh air. And now, I'm going to have to sit through this scene where I've got Jabba, a thin down, younger Jabba the Hutt, who's able to move around on his own slimy body. Um,
And
yeah. So, like I said, I don't know
and the
which version is better.
CGI Jabba looks less real and convincing than the big fat puppet Jabba
Yeah.
from 1983.
You can tell even Han Solo's interaction with Jabba here is fake. It's better that they should have just left the guy in. It was better with the burly guy because it was more real, this interaction. But again, do without this version and just go to theatrical.
Well, there must have been something in the deal when Lucas sold the films to Disney to say they couldn't re-release the theatrical films, or they'd have done it by now.
From what I understand, and anybody in the chat, correct me if I'm wrong, but way back in the day when Lucas started to fiddle with these movies, he in essence said the theatrical movies are dead to me. That's not what I want anymore. These special editions with the content that I wanted in this is it. And so the theatrical versions are dead. So I think that's why, if it was indeed in the contract when he sold all the rights that they can't go back and do the theatrical. Yes, Matt, that with the burly guy with the big fur coat, that at least was more relatable to deal with. So anyway, maybe that's why we'll never see the theatrical cuts again.
Unless you go to the BFI cinema in London in June, where they've dug a theatrical print out of the BFI vaults and are doing 2 screenings of it. And I think we've lost Sharon again.
Oh no, I'm still here.
You just froze.
I'm
Yeah,
here.
but it's interesting that they're now letting the BFI do a few screenings with their archival original print. So it makes you wonder whether some attitudes are softening.
Maybe, maybe, maybe we're just over and done with every single special edition that has come out, all the extra material, all the changed material. Maybe the audience is just done. But again, coming from the audience that saw this in the theater, uh, the first VHS copies of this movie in the trilogy set, I believe it had a blue and purple tinge on the cover. It was a beautiful VHS set. Those were theatrical cuts. If anyone was lucky enough to get the theatrical on DVDs, maybe they just aren't going to make that anymore.
I mean, the only time the theatrical versions have made it beyond VHS were the special edition DVDs. Came with an extra disc that had the laser disc version put on. So sub DVD picture quality, and they weren't anamorphically adjusted. So you've got tiny little window box in the middle of your screen to sort of make them look as bad and unwatchable as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Alex mentions, well, they have the theatrical cut preserved, mastered. It exists according to Dennis Murin. Yeah, it does exist. It's out there. And there's probably still a few copies of the original VHS trilogy. If you're lucky enough to get it on eBay. Oh yeah, you gotta love Princess Leia here. So is everybody on the Governor Tarkin, Princess Leia moment? This is a great interaction, man. She holds her ground.
Unfortunately, if you're watching the theatrical cut, there's currently an entertaining chess game going on.
Oh, we're about a minute. Yeah, that's about a minute past where we are now. So yeah, who's watching? The theatrical, and at the chess scene, because where I'm at the moment where they're about to blow up Alderaan.
I say you should let the Wookiee win.
It's not wise to upset a Wookiee. Maybe I'll just fast forward. No, I got to see Alderaan get blown up again. They're on Dantooine. But she's
It-
lying, of course. She's lying.
but it's also just making it perfectly clear that this is a universe of the pitchiest black and the whitest white. So everyone in the Empire is irredeemably, totally evil, so that we don't have any moral qualms about, stormtroopers being gunned down left, right, and centre. You're not
Right.
worrying about Austin Powers style notes being delivered to a stormtrooper's family to say that, Daddy won't be coming home because he's been murdered by Luke Skywalker.
Yep. Yep. So now I caught up to the chess scene, and Alderaan has been blown up with a little special effect added with the rings.
Where basically they've seen the explosion at the start of Star
Mhm.
Trek 6 and gone,
Hmm.
let's have one like that.
There you go. What? Okay, Alex. What color is Luke's saber in your Falcon scene? It is
White.
blue, like light blue, white, maybe a little tinge of purple. It has been so long since I've seen theatrical. What color is it in the theatrical?
Look pretty white to me.
Yeah, Alex, I think it's white with a tinge of blue.
I think it's I think it's white with a white in the
No tinge
in the
of
one
green or
I'm
anything.
watching. Well, no, 'cause it's the weapon of the white supremacist Luke
Oh,
Skywalker, who's been out killing Jawas and Sand people and stuff for fun and blowing up womp rats.
oh. So Jedi Wizard, will Alderaan survive? That's where I'm at. Oh, Alderaan is toast. You know what? If we were to have a drinking game, every
So
time he,
what you're saying is Grand Moff Tarkin has just vaporized elderly Jimmy Smits.
basically that was the moment. Yes.
I'm shocked that they didn't go back and like superimpose a shot of an elderly Jimmy Smits sort of screaming and fading into light,
That
just
was
to
a
tie
very
it in
interesting
more.
casting choice, um, to cast him. Of course,
He,
later in the trilogy, the later trilogy, when you do have a lot bigger name stars,
but
you
Smits
go
was a
figure.
sort of a big name coming out of the 80s into the
Yeah.
90s. So with his earring from LA Law.
Yeah. And he was in that cop show, not Hill Street Blues. Um,
Was it NYPD Blue he was in?
was it NYPD Blue he was in that he died? And yeah, that could be.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
replaced David Caruso when he went off to have a disastrous film career.
yeah. Oh yes, he was in West Wing as the incumbent, upcoming president. I think he was elected president after
Who
Bartlett. Yeah.
unconvincingly defeated Hawkeye from MASH in the presidential election.
Hmm.
I do find it funny each time I hear the Wookiee groan. He sort of reminds me of the behind the scenes footage where the actor who was playing Chewie was actually speaking all the dialogue in English. So when you are approaching the Death Star and he goes, "Arr!" You kind of hear this someone with a West Country accent going, "They've got us in a tractor beam."
Well, they should have. There was a comment about earlier. I can't remember who commented about the subtitles when they had R2D2 and it was like whistling bleep bleep. Um, the subtitles for Chewbacca, we don't actually see what he's saying. Wouldn't that be very clever if the subtitles could actually tell us what he's saying and the droids are saying?
I think his is expressive enough to tell us all we need to know. But that's one of these examples that with the casting that basically they want Lucas knew that for Chewie he wanted someone who was big, and this guy came in who was 7 foot tall, and it's kind of, well, that's what we need. Yeah, the fact
Yeah.
that he has a silly accent and doesn't matter. You're not going to see his face. If you're going to have a voice, you can dub it, or you can just put monkey noises over the top.
Yeah, basically. Um, and as we know that Peter Mayhew passed away, um, is going on two. Was it 2 years ago or?
Yeah, and it's the same with Darth Vader. That Dave Prowse was a big burly
Speaking of which,
bodybuilder and looked really imposing.
yes.
Learned all his dialogue, did it live on
Oh,
camera.
did you lose me
Obviously, he
again?
was the only person who thought that Darth Vader was going to be
I'm back.
Somerset cider drinker rampaging across the universe.
Uh, I am not seeing James, but I know he's there.
I'm here.
Yeah, you're there, James.
I'm,
I'm just not seeing you on the program. Um, but one of the things I was going to mention last week is Lar Park Lincoln passed away. Um,
Ms.
and
Swift
I
says
was
I'm
I
here.
was wanting to do a tribute for her. She was a guest on one of our watch parties when we did the um, the what am I thinking of? Um, she was in the fourth Friday the 13th movie. Was it the fourth or the
Oh,
fifth?
part
And she was a
7, The
guest.
New Blood.
Yes,
And,
and she
and,
was a
and
guest on
House
our watch
2, The
party.
Second Story.
Yep, and so that that made me sad that she passed away. Yeah, Miss Swift, she did. She passed away a little over a week ago. And that would have been the movie that I do a tribute, but we have already did that for a watch party and she was the guest and it was very enjoyable to have her as a
We could
guest.
do her episode of Highway to Heaven, or is that a bit too on the nose?
Oh, and I know she was on was it Falcon Crest or Knots Landing? I think it was Knots Landing. She was also a regular on.
She's an
So,
episode of Murder, She Wrote. What more do you want?
and she did a lot of the episodic shows. But anyway, yeah, rest in peace to her. Well, you'd think with all the technology that they would have to make a Death Star in space, they would have a little computer, maybe Google search on Solo. He's a smuggler. Oh, he's probably got smuggling compartments. We probably need to check before they're checking now and getting blown away. But yeah, shouldn't they have some kind of computer system, Wi Fi network up in space? They can just easily do a Google search.
I think there are far more basic things that they should have rather than the World Wide Web. Some sort of sharp shooting academy, as an example.
Yes, Edward the Black Prince, the Falcon would be in the Empire database as a smuggler ship. Absolutely. Yep. Oh, yes, Calbot. She was also in House 2, the second story. And I've not seen that, the sequel to House. I hadn't seen the second story.
The House films are bad movies.
Oh, we did the first one, though. That was fun.
Then there's like one or two more after that. There's like one that wasn't even, it's like not a House movie, but then they release it as one that has Lance Henriksen in, and it's rubbish.
Yeah, maybe they should have just stopped after the first one. Oh, yes, and pretty soon we're going to get to that famous blooper when the stormtrooper gets smacked in the head by the door.
Well, I do like the way that like Han and Leia emerges from like their first scenes as such fully formed characters that they really have zero journey over the trilogy apart from kind of falling in love a little towards the end. But other than
Yeah.
that, they're exactly, because if you look at it, Han's been an Imperial officer, he's been a pilot, he's been a smuggler, he's already had loads of adventures. This is just like another one for him. She's been a princess, she's been a senator, she's been a diplomat, she's been part of the resistance. This is just another chapter in her story. Luke, he's been on Tatooine farming moisture and shooting sand people. This is the most exciting thing that's ever happened to him, apart from shooting sand people.
Yeah, when you get back to the basis of the story, George Lucas came up with Luke's story, Luke's journey.
Well, Luke's
From a
story is
young
is
boy.
is what you say the classic hero's journey. That
Mhm,
he's
mhm.
starting from humble beginnings. He's got a wise older mentor.
Yep, and he's on a journey to adulthood, to who he was meant to be, but couldn't be because he was on Tatooine farming moisture. Um, and
which
that
which is
was
which is kind of
Lucas's original
when you
story.
get like later on into the series where this idea that Kenobi had hidden him there to hide him from his father, and that's all when I start thinking things are just very silly in Luke's background, because it's like, so you've hidden him with the sole remaining relatives in Anakin's family using the same surname on
Yes,
his home planet, and
yes.
you've disguised yourself, Obi-Wan Kenobi, by moving in next door as old Ben Kenobi, who's told everyone he knew Anakin.
Yes, that's exactly what they tried to pull on us. Um, and it's almost like he had the story. Lucas had the story, but you have to fill in the pieces now because the story that you've progressed to doesn't fit with what you've already told. So, how are you going to make it make sense? Well, it doesn't make sense. I don't know anybody who
Well,
bought.
this is because originally, when it's starting out, Luke almost certainly wasn't going to be Darth Vader's son. And certainly when you're looking at Star Wars, it's blatantly obvious that Luke and Leia are not meant to be sisters. Otherwise, you wouldn't be having the slightly uncomfortable incestuous relationship between them. And I think kind of the proof that that wasn't the original intention is that Alan Dean Foster was asked to write a screenplay for a low-budget sequel if the first film wasn't a hit.
I don't know if I'd ever gotten the answer to that.
Splinter of a Mind's Eye, in
Um,
which
am I
it's all
am I
about the
gone?
romance
I
between
thought I'm
Luke and
back.
Leia.
Okay, am I back? I'm back.
You're back.
James is back.
I was just saying that the whole sort of
Yes.
Luke,
So yeah, the
Luke,
whole brother
Luke
and
and Leia
sister.
were never originally
Was
conceived.
it a part of the original story, or was it part of we have to make them brother and sister, otherwise
It wasn't the original
there was a
story
potential
because
for a
if
love
it
interest? Well, we can't have that because now they're brother and sister. So now she's got to go to Han.
yeah, well basically they
Um,
have a love interest in this
yeah,
film,
and so
which would
that's
which
not
would,
something I
which
don't think I've ever seen in an interview or in any backstory as to why they've done it that way.
and Splinter of a Mind Eye, which was originally written as a sequel before they got the go ahead for Empire, that has lots of Luke and Leia loving action in it, which would seem to suggest to me that either George Lucas thinks incest is good, or they weren't originally conceived as the space equivalent of the Blue Lagoon.
Well, if anybody's got the definitive background on that, it's an interesting plot point. But I mean, it all works out. They explain it. Um, okay, so it makes sense.
No, I think she just decides that Han is far cooler than Luke.
Well, yeah, maybe. I guess it depends. I'm Team Han, absolutely all the way. I had so many posters of him on my wall.
Look, you could have a moisture farmer and go out and shoot womp rats before going to mope around the grave of Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, or you
Yeah,
could have an upwardly mobile smuggler with a spaceship of his own.
that's right. So, are you guys at the trash compactor yet? Is anyone at the trash compactor?
No, Leia is just about to say, "Aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper?" To which the
Yep.
answer is no, because if you stand a stormtrooper action figure next to a Luke Skywalker action figure, they are exactly the same height. So Luke is stormtrooper sized.
Did anybody ever have the original trilogy um, little action figures, minifigures, action figures? They were only about like that big, maybe what two and a half, 3 inches
Yeah,
at the most. They were the coolest toys ever.
yeah. So the theatrical cut, they're busy
Oh,
in a
no.
trash compactor at the moment.
Yep, my version, I must face him alone. Yep, he knows. So yeah, we're about 30 seconds away in my version to the trash compactor. Oh, Alex has the action figures. Uh, Mr. Furzo, I do. You have the action figures. That is so cool. Uh, and Jedi Wizard, I got some from a friend somewhere, but in storage at the moment. And depending on the condition, they're worth some good money.
Basically, if you were joyless parents who wouldn't let you take them out of the packaging, they're worth lots of money.
Yeah, unfortunately, us dumb kids, we just ripped them open. I remember the little Jawa. The Jawa was the smallest of them, even smaller than, no,
Well,
same size as R2D2, I believe. And
oh,
they were about
your
half the size of the other
your
one.
Jawa figure can also double up as a Phantasm action figure.
Oh, really? Yep,
Yeah,
I
because
remember them all really well.
I mean,
Yeah.
we got some different stuff in the UK because they were made by over here by a UK company under license. So you got some things like the Death Star play sets and things were completely different in the UK to what was in the US market.
Oh, Alex Peacock fell into a rabbit hole a few years ago for us. Okay, and spent a little too much money on figures to fill in the collection. That's what I would have done had I been smart and just held on to the collection. But yeah, over time, I think I broke them or lost them or they went into the void somewhere. All right. So you all know about the sinking of the when Han Solo. Yeah, there you go. You can see Han's lips move. It's worse, and then the second later you hear it's worse. You'd think that liquid would be a little bit greasier. I'm imagining it not being water, but a lot of oil and grease and maybe waste products.
I'm sure he appreciated a nice mouthful of that.
Yeah, and going underwater in that, not too fun. But it looks like water. Yes, and yes, Alex, and Chewie's at the door because he didn't want the mohair suit to get wet. Absolutely. That would have been a nightmare. Oh, Mr. Furzel said I remember shooting these things in the 64 game. Super Nintendo had some pretty awesome games. Super Star Wars, Super Empire Strikes Back, and Super Return of the Jedi, which I can never get through, by the way.
I always think this sequence in the garbage crusher goes on just a bit too long to maintain the suspense.
Well, this scene also reminds me that what Carrie Fisher said when she had the discussion with George Lucas about her costume. And Lucas's response to her was, "There are no bras in space."
Apart from the
So
one
I think
she
it becomes a
wore in,
little too clear. Yes, Alex, the music is just killer. Oh, uh, um, Jedi Wizard. I love the SNES games. I spent a lot of teenage years trying to beat them. Did you ever get to the end of those games? I don't know anybody who ever finished them. They were hard. Okay, watch your head. Watch your head. Everybody, watch your head. Oh, good job. Jedi Wizard said yes once they were hard. Yes. Miss Swift. Um, okay, I am singing that along to Benny and the Jets. That is very clever. So for the longest time, I always thought, well, what's the point of going further up of all the junk? You're still going to get squished. As a kid, this is what I thought. It's not helping anything, but it sure would help getting out from that junk from piercing your body when it starts getting crushed.
It's keeping you alive for a few seconds longer in the hope that in those seconds your robotic slaves will finally obey their orders and open the door.
Yeah.
And after all, the series would have been pretty short if the three main characters and Chewie had been pancaked at this point.
Mhm. Movie over.
I think then your
And
big question, because in the radio series, Tarkin's aide Motti spends a long time trying to convince Tarkin that the first thing he should do when the Death Star is operational is fly it to Coruscant, blow the planet up, and declare himself emperor.
well, that would have circumvented half of this story, wouldn't it?
So, but well, effectively, the heroes get killed in the trash compactor. Vader gets sent off on some other mission, and Tarkin goes rogue, kills the Emperor, and there you are. That's the end of the film series. You know, you've been
They would
put
have
in
still
charge
made
of.
a prequel.
Watching the story of how the young boy was born who would one day
Mhm.
die in a trash compactor.
These are some mad skills that Obi has. They know all about the Death Star technology. They know how to do everything because obviously the technology is universal.
Well,
Everybody uses the same
he has
technology.
seen the schematics that were stored on R2. So, having a look at the blueprints probably helped. That and the fact the Empire were kind enough to put a great big off switch in the middle of it.
Exactly. And that's all you have to do. Just one switch, just pull it down, on off. Okay, now the chase is on.
It's also watching this, it makes me think of that bit in Galaxy Quest where Sigourney Weaver's meant to be going through that Jeffries tube and it has the fan in it. And she's like, who the hell designed this shit? That when you've got this with like all these tiny narrow walkways and
Yep.
perilous drops all over the place, it's
Yep. And of course, in Galaxy Quest, she actually said, fuck this, but they edited that out. You can see her lips move.
old Johnny Devick asks why in the Tarkin rebellion would he blow up
Mm.
the planet? Why not a moon and ask people if they felt loyalty going forwards? Well, he'd be blowing up the planet because it has the Emperor on it, and it would guarantee that the Emperor was dead and not going to show up and blast him with force lightning or something. Classic Han Solo moment.
Classic. And okay, so one, two, how many of them? And they still couldn't hit him?
Well, it's exactly the kind of thing that he then later plays on in the Indiana Jones films, where
Mhm.
Yeah, you meet the guy with the sword who looks really impressive, and Indy just
Mhm.
shoots him.
Yep.
And I'm not sure that just gunning door controls makes things work. Yes,
He
Miss
shot
Smith.
first and
Who
asked
puts a
questions.
corridor full of smashy chomping
Yeah.
things in a ship? Yes, the answer to that, as everyone knows, is Russell T Davies in Doctor Who. See,
Had the
I
storm.
would now like an Austin Powers cut of this movie where each time a stormtrooper falls down the cooling shaft, we cut to a distant planet where some family is delivered a note to say that Daddy won't be coming home tonight.
Yes. So had they been smart, the stormtroopers would have just lined up on the other side of that platform and just stood there until one of them hit Luke. Yeah, well, Johnny Devick, there should be. How many stormtroopers does it take to? Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of those.
Yeah, these stormtroopers aren't clones. The clones are long gone. Well, has to be said that if you were building a clone army, you'd presumably try and clone someone who could shoot straight.
I've been waiting for you, Obi-Wan.
She's like the most disappointing lightsaber fight known to man.
It's one of the quickest. For anybody who doesn't want to know how this fight ends, yeah, spoilers, spoilers. No spoilers. I'm just kidding.
Well, it ends with him realizing that if he kills Obi-Wan, he'll make him stronger. So he instead cuts his legs off and freezes him in carbonite, which means no Force ghost ever.
Hmm.
Plus, it would be revenge for having his
Oh.
own legs chopped off.
Yeah, he lost his arms. Did he? No, he lost both legs. I think he lost one arm
And
and
lay
had
there
half his
saying,
face
"'Tis but a
burned off.
flesh wound."
This was a flesh wound. Yep. Yes, Mad Matt. What about the theory that the stormtroopers are under orders not to kill them because they need the heroes to believe that they escaped so that they will fly to the rebel base while tracking them? Absolutely. I think that's the whole gist of why they're allowed to leave. And that's when even Leia says, um, "They let us go," because she knows better. Otherwise, they would have blown up the ship at least. But yeah, they did put the tracking device in. Oh, the moment of truth.
If you just don't even try and fight back, you die in this
No.
duel. But it's also why, when you get into the prequel trilogy, that the lightsaber fights just become ludicrous when you have things like Christopher Lee and Yoda jumping in the air and twirling round and doing backflips and things. When you kind of see how stately everything is in the original films.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's
come on, Alec Guinness, at least do a backflip.
yeah, a CGI Alec Guinness would done that.
Well,
So
you
what was
totally,
interesting
he would
is
totally not be showing off if he did a backflip.
no. What's interesting is when Vader cut Obi-Wan down with the lightsaber, when the cape fell, it didn't appear that it was cut in half. But in reality, had the lightsaber actually penetrated the cape, the cape would have been cut in half.
Yeah. And as I said earlier, that basically Obi-Wan was killed because Alec Guinness asked for the character to be killed because he didn't want to be in any sequels, and he had nothing to do as a character in the film beyond this point. So George Lucas gave in to that demand.
Yeah. Yes, Edward the Black Prince. Duel of the Fates is still awesome. I don't want to hear otherwise. That was epic. That was one of the highlights of Phantom Menace. Absolutely.
There are no highlights in the Phantom Menace.
Oh, I disagree. That was a pretty epic fight, and I do
Look,
have a I
it's
have a
it's
Qui-Gon
the
and Darth
story of
Maul action
the
figure.
deeply racist portrayal of the Trade Federation, the
Mhm.
deeply racist portrayal of Jar Jar, Massa Massa, I'm a slave, Binks. It's it's irredeemable as a film.
Um, there I revisit that every couple years. I watched like all. I'm not going to say 9 movies. I don't really care for the new trilogy, but I'll revisit all 6 movies every couple
I've
years,
I've
and
watched
I'll
the
sit through it.
I've watched the new trilogy once when they're in the
Mhm.
cinemas, and I feel no need to watch any of them
Yeah,
again. I mean,
exactly.
basically, they were pretty uninspired remakes of each of the originals.
Um, I'm with you on that. I saw each of them, I think, once or twice, and I have them on Blu-ray, and that I've done my part. Um, the only thing I am grateful for is that the way that they handle Carrie Fisher's death, I was pleased that they didn't try to either ignore it or to over like pretend it didn't exist. They at least handled it with as much dignity as I think they could at the time,
I
and
would
they
I would have
finished her
preferred
character
I would have
respectfully.
preferred them to have tried and changed the Last Jedi so that Leia died in the Last Jedi and Luke survived. Because when you're marketing the whole
Oh,
lot as a Skywalker saga and you
yeah,
kill off Skywalker,
yeah. This had better work. Yeah, it'll work all right for you guys.
of course, at this stage in his career, Peter Cushing wasn't exactly selective about what work he did because after his wife died, he effectively worked to take his mind off his grief for years and would effectively take any job he was given. Because he had Sharon Has Frozen Again, such a work ethic, things like the Hammer film people really took advantage of him, and he was paid a fraction of what Christopher Lee was just because he wouldn't haggle because he wanted to keep on working.
Yeah. So yeah, old Johnny Devick, the ending destroyed Star Wars for me. Palpatine won.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if I want to follow up to Return of the Jedi, I seem to remember in what's now classed as the Legends series, that originally Timothy Zahn wrote a decent trilogy with Grand Admiral Thrawn trying to
Mhm.
re-establish the Empire that was much better than anything they came up with in The Force Awakens. I mean, because the whole thing, the Force Awakens, you've got, so the First Order are basically the Empire all over again. They've got their
Mhm.
Star Killer, which is basically the Death Star but bigger. But we've already done the Death Star again in Return of the Jedi, so
Right. It's nothing original. It's just it's like continuing the same story almost.
I think the
Um,
Rebel base is in Guatemala.
was it? I was going to say Yugoslavia.
I'm pretty certain that they filmed that in Guatemala. Let me just see.
Yeah, get a Google search going.
It is part of Guatemala's Tikal
Hmm.
National Park.
There you go. Yeah, Eric says Leia should have died in The Last Jedi when Kylo Ren blew her up. That Force stuff was just ridiculous. Yeah, it was. I think the
Kylo,
whole
Kylo,
the whole.
Kylo Ren, I have to say, you could tell he was a Skywalker through and through. He was just like the prequel Anakin, a whiny little
Mhm.
bitch.
I found the J.J. Abrams trilogy unnecessary. But the thing about the Star Wars universe, it will not die. Absolutely will not. It will take several different forms. There's going to be TV shows, movies, more video games. It will continue on. So, how do you make something original?
Well,
You
it's not.
know,
Well, at the moment, it's not continuing in the cinema, is it? Because their attempt to expand that with like the Solo film and things just didn't work.
right? But it will. Mark my words. There is no killing this franchise. Whether or not it deserves to die, it's a matter of opinion. And what form it should take, again, it's a matter of opinion.
And
Knowing
now
that
we're
to
getting
me,
into the stretch of
you
the
know,
film that is quite heavily ripped off from the 1955 British war movie The Dam Busters.
and they had the same battle down the trench. Is that it?
Well, the whole thing with the when I was away the other week, I was actually in Europe on an Air
Uh-huh.
War Europe tour, visiting where the Dam Busters had been. But yeah, you've got the whole thing with them flying down the lake while they're under fire from enemy gun positions, trying to drop a bouncing bomb on very specific target. And you watch that film with a chat between the pilots on the radio, and it's very, very, very like this, but with
Mhm.
propellers and Lancaster bombers and stiff upper lip British accents. And it's perhaps not surprising that it's that similar, because when Lucas did his preview cut of this film for his friends, they'd not done the special effects. So he used footage from World War II movies to sort of illustrate the
Mhm.
dogfight scenes. Oh, and his cinematographer was also the cinematographer on the Dam Busters.
Well, yeah, basically that's what this is. This is a dogfight, an aerial dogfight.
I mean, effectively, it's
Mhm.
the Japanese film Hidden Fortress with a bit of Flash Gordon brushed over the top and the ending of the Dam Busters.
So I'm taken back to now when I first saw this in the theater, and at 7 or 8 years old, knew nothing about World War II, knew nothing about the aerial dogfighting, nothing like that. This was the best thing I'd ever seen in the cinema. And being the ripe old age of, 7 or 8, I had seen a few. Um, but this was just the most exciting and thrilling movie I'd ever seen.
Hawkins has just showed up in the theatrical version.
Ugh.
What came
Ugh.
first, casting a fat actor or calling him Hawkins?
Yeah, this scene is unnecessary.
Fat shaming in space.
Yeah, fat shaming in space.
Here we have Garrick Hargon as Biggs Darklighter, who actually filmed a scene from the start of the movie that then got left out, where
Yeah.
he'd returned to Tatooine. He joined the Imperial Academy and was visiting Luke before he defected to the Resistance.
Hmm.
And that scene parlays into about half an hour of radio series.
Yeah, there was a lot of bigs in the radio series. I remember
Well,
most of it occurred before the events
Garrick
of this
Hargon
movie.
always says that he recorded a hell of a lot more material for
Mhm.
this film than ever made it anywhere near the screen.
Yeah,
Oh no,
it's
the
just
theatrical
unnecessary.
version, Hawkins is now crackling.
Yeah, there were a couple comments about the current condition of the Star Wars franchise, and you have to have people that actually care about this franchise to carry it forward. You have to have people who understand the spirit of it to continue it on in a good way. I just, I just stick to this original trilogy when all else
You,
fails.
you can see a very similar thing with Star Trek when J.J. Abrams revisited that. Then he was quite open that he'd not watched Star Trek, he didn't like it, and then lo and behold, he produces a trilogy of films that has very little in common with Star Trek.
Yeah, I was actually impressed with his first Star Trek venture. I actually enjoyed it.
I was much less. Well, the things I liked in those films were the cast photo from Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, turning up in old Spock's belongings in one of them. I like that. That was about it, actually. But Star Trek V is still canon, even in an alternate universe. That pleases me greatly.
It still is. It lives on.
Yep, and these are the bits that if you watch the Dam Busters, freaky and black and white as it may be, but it's the same thing.
This is some phenomenal filmmaking, these scenes.
Yes, it's the bit they go, yes, we've noticed that there's a slight design flaw in the Death Star, and we might be a little bit vulnerable.
And as we, turn out in decades later when they finally make the movie, that it was made on purpose by a disgruntled employee.
Let's
I
face
don't,
it.
this I'm all right.
If you work for the Empire, you are going to be a disgruntled employee. When the fact is, you basically only get promoted when someone above you has been force strangled. And all it means is that
Yeah.
you are one step closer to being force strangled.
Yes. Mr. Furzel asks, wasn't Porkins a super pilot in the comic/books? Anybody familiar with that?
Apparently, he is known as Jet Pono Porkins, a trader from Bestine 4, who had a life as a rebel pilot, a seasoned rebel pilot, lots of things about comic strips. So, yes, he wasn't just a fat guy who died amusingly.
Yeah, he was about to say, I'm all right. No, he's not all right. Oh, he's sensing.
There's some
He's
very
sensing a
impressive
disturbance in the
facial
force.
hair in the rebel control room. Look,
Nice
Mad Matt,
one.
they are not going to fall for any banana in their tailpipe.
That's a good one. If they start shooting out bananas, watch out. Oh, the force is strong in this one. Lasts about 10 minutes.
French run. This is the Dambusters.
All right. Well, the Gremlins have gotten me a few times. At least it's better than last week. And next week it'll be even better. So what's everybody's time left on their movie? Are we pretty much synced up now? We're probably not more than 30 seconds to a minute off, I think, in the versions.
There's about 14 and a half minutes left on the McClunky cut and about 12 minutes left on the theatrical.
Yep, I've got about 10, 11 minutes on my cut, which is, I think, I got this digital set when they first were released in digital format. I'm guessing. Okay.
Governor
Alex, because I've got
Tarkin,
about 15 minutes
you
left.
should have evacuated to your shuttle. I'm sure they'd have let you leave
Yeah.
in peace.
Eric's got 13 minutes. Yeah, we're basically right on target. Stay on target. No, they were so superior in their thinking they would have no reason to evacuate. This piddly little band of rebel fighters is no match for the Empire. But what they didn't count on was Luke Skywalker.
But it's also, if you look at it, the way that space combat happens in the Star Wars films is that apart from this, you don't have fighters taking on capital ships. It's always capital ships versus capital ships. So star destroyers and super star destroyers are taking on whatever the rebel equivalent is. So
Right.
the idea that if you've got the biggest battle station going, that someone's going to come in like the equivalent of a biplane torpedo bomber and take you out would just seem ludicrous. because that's not how they do their wars.
Exactly. And there's not a whole lot of rebel ships coming at them. They would have no reason to panic. But you think they're maybe now hitting themselves in the head with that open drain pipe that they've just now discovered there's an open drain
Yeah,
pipe?
maybe with a bit of greeting. That'd be
Or
my
exhaust
suggestion.
port. It's an exhaust port, yeah.
Yeah. As I say, get someone up there with a bit of grating to put it over the top.
Get a plumber out there. Someone fix it. Someone plug it up.
Now, I think some of these shots of Tarkin are just random film trims from earlier in the production that George Lucas chucked in here just to make it feel a bit more tense. No, Eric, Luke only hits it because of all of his practice blowing up Womp Rat, not because of the Force.
It's because of the Force.
It's because he is a top Womp Rat, Sand Person, and Jawa killer.
No, because he puts his guidance system away and it's the Force that guides him to make that shot. Sorry, did I just give away some spoilers to anybody who didn't see that coming?
I thought they'd fail in their attack and then the Empire would blow up the rebel planet and that would be the end of the film.
Well, imagine if that had been the ending. Everybody dead. Everybody's dead except, well, Luke would have been out in the middle of nowhere in his ship, and there would have been a couple rebel fighters still floundering in space with
Han would have been
nowhere to
out
go.
there. Han and Chewie would have been out there.
Yeah, Han and Chewie would have still been out there, but they would have no base to go back to.
Leia would have been a teensy bit dead.
Just a little bit, little teensy bit. So anybody on the rebel base right now would have been panicking a little bit, just a little bit.
It's surprising that they're not trying to do any sort of evacuation like they did from Hoth. Just in case our 1 in a million plan doesn't pan out, maybe we should try and get out of here.
Or non-essential personnel would have been evacuated. The Force is strong in this one.
I would have
A
totally
moment
liked
of
to see the
truth.
brave heroes from Battle Beyond the Stars in this. A bit of George Peppard would have improved it no end.
Really?
As Cowboy.
Yes.
I think Plan B would have been to use the impressive facial hair to bat away the Death Star.
Yes, Jedi Wizard beings. No, at least we still have Wedge. Okay, moment of truth. Sorry, Luke, you better not mess this up. When out of nowhere,
You see, and note
Han
that
and Chewie
although
say,
Luke is using the Force, Darth Vader hasn't noticed that he's trying to gun down some amazingly Force-sensitive person.
well, no, he made that comment. The Force is strong in this one. He'd made that comment before, so he knows. He senses Luke.
Yeah, but he's not made the connection that it's his son
No.
because they've not made that up yet. And oh, look, it's the explosion from Star Trek.
It is. And we could have done without the rings. The original explosion was good enough. But
Never mind. What we've got now is some Obi-Wan gives some final words, and
yep.
then we've got the joys of Nazi propaganda.
Yes.
There's
Yes,
nothing,
Mr. Frizzle. Hey, can we
because
add a CG ring of energy when the Death Star blows? Don't question me, just do it. That's what I think Lucas was when he was overseeing these. Carrie! That's what he yells, Carrie. Okay, go ahead, James. I'm sorry.
because nothing tells you that people are really good and heroes like restaging Nazi propaganda films.
Mm.
Yes, the memory of the Death Star massacre will live long in the Empire.
Yeah. You know, that is true.
And when I say Nazi propaganda, this is the bit I mean, because this whole sequence looks straight like it is lifted from The Triumph of the Will, Lenny Rosenthal's Nazi propaganda film.
Actually, Cowbot, he does yell Carrie. That's with all the research that I have seen, he yells her name by mistake and they just left it in.
Chewie doesn't deserve a medal, hell if I know. He's just a primate.
Oh, Alex. Okay, according to Mark, he didn't. He didn't yell Carrie. He yelled "Hey." I'd always thought and understood he had yelled Carrie.
In a small but moving later ceremony, Chewie was given a bunch of bananas.
I think R2's mainframe and his whole circuitry would have been totally fried. There would have been no saving it. And C3PO's dent in his head is still there. Ah, okay. Is everybody done? We're all at the credits. That was
Yep.
phenomenal.
Miss Swift says, why couldn't
That
Lucas have
movie.
edited in a medal for Chewie? As I said, a nice scene at the end where he's given like a fruit bowl or something.
Again. Oh, am I back? I gotta be
You're,
back.
you're back.
Okay. Well, it's not as bad as last week. Um, okay, so Jedi Wizard, always a classic. This will always be one of my favorites. Wife's cheese rating, stale cheddar.
And she's gone again. Wife's cheese rating, stale cheddar cheese on mouldy rye bread.
And till the
Sounds
day he
good.
died, never watched a single one. To each his own. Okay. I have to go to my phone to see. Can you hear me? Am I back?
I can hear
I'm
you.
back. Okay. I am back. Okay, so no, we're not going to sit through the credits to enjoy this. Oh, the Oscar score.
Oh, we're
So
not going to
all
watch the
right.
holiday special. We should watch the 3-hour Battlestar Galactica pilot movie for some Star
No,
Wars knockoff action.
no. Uh,
It has disco robots, it has a cantina, and it has a Han Solo knockoff. What more could you want? Rogue.
for
No,
next
not the
week.
2004 pilot film, Alex. Saga of a Star
Come on,
World.
I can't be
The
lost
original
again.
1970s Star Wars
Okay, I'm going to
knockoff.
wait until I'm fully back to announce next week's. Yeah, and James is there. I just can't see him, but James is there.
I'm
Um,
definitely here.
so okay, so Calbot says still my second favorite movie despite its flaws. Yeah, okay. Eric, well, that's easy to answer. A better internet connection for Sharon. I am working on it, and it's going to be even better next week. At least I'm getting better. So for next week, I'm going to just be quick to announce it before I go fading away into the nether regions. So we are going to do a little sci-fi comedy from the 90s. It's been on my list for a while, and we are going to do The Frighteners. So we're going to kind of mix it up into a horror a little bit. Um, and that was from, I want to say 1996 or
So, so
97.
Peter Jackson directing Michael J.
Yep.
Fox.
Yep. And it's an all-star cast. And if you haven't seen it, okay, Helifino says 99. I know it's the late 90s. It's always a good watch. So yeah, it's readily available on all the services. So if you have not seen it and if you're having a hard time finding it anywhere in your region, reach out to me. I'll see if I can help you find it. And so it looks like y'all had a good time. Um, we're revving up to get into the midst of our summer viewing, and I'll be making an announcement very soon on that. So anyway, thank you all for
Is this
joining
the
us.
announcement of the Summer of Busey?
The Summer of Busey. Maybe we have to come up with a catchy title. I'm still working on it. I'm having a hell of a time getting a solid internet connection. Next week will be better, and we're gonna pull this summer together, and it's gonna be amazing. Crossing my fingers. So as long as you all are here for it, it's going to be an epic time. So until next week, may the fourth be with you all, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us, James, and for all of you in the chat. I appreciate it.
Good week, everybody.
We'll see you all next week.